Hey everybody, welcome to Open Door Philosophy. I'm Derek Parsons, and I'm here with the fabulous Taylor Jones.
Hey everyone.
Welcome to episode 58, where we're going to talk about hope. What is it? What can it mean for our lives? And what do different philosophical schools say about hope? But, of course, before that, it is the blissful summertime. Taylor, how are you?
I am doing pretty good. I've been out of school for a week and a half now. Almost 2 weeks. So, getting into the swing of things. But I have like an entire dorm room to unpack at my house. So that's kind of the big challenge for the time being. How are you, Mr. Parsons?
I'm doing so good. When this episode comes out, I'll be done. I'll be done with students anyway. Graduation is 1 week from today. And that's great. That means it's summertime. Get a little downtime for the brain. I honestly haven't graded anything in the last 3 weeks, and I don't really know what to do with myself on the weekends. Like, I have all this free time. That's great. It's great. So looking forward to summer. Going to be in Colorado, the beautiful high mountain air of Colorado in a couple of weeks. And, you know, for people who have listened over the years, that is something I do every year, and really looking forward to it. It's just going to be Kirsten and I.
Wow. Solo trip.
Yeah, a little getaway from it all. So anyway, that's me.
Very nice.
Well, we don't have any corrections from last episode that I know of, thankfully. No confusing who Lazarus family relations
Oh, goodness.
are. But gosh, we can't correct it. But man, the audio for me last episode was no bueno. And I don't know why we didn't know it was that way until started editing and post-production. So we did what we could with it. So if you listen to that episode, hopefully it's not too deterring. Because honestly, I thought it was a great episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Really
our
cool
transcendentalism episode.
Yeah, it was good stuff. Good questions in there. Anyway, hey, before we get going, let's hop over to the bookshelf and talk about summer reads.
So I really want to finish the Shadow and Bone trilogy first. And then I picked up a new book called, I have it here. It's Homecoming by Kate Morton. It's like a true crime novel about a lady whose family is wrapped up in a murder, I think. So I wanted to read that. And then obviously, like most people, I have a big physical TBR because I have a book buying problem. And I want to read as much as I can off of that before I buy new books.
Yeah, that is a problem. Well, great. So what do you mean you don't want to read academic stuff during your summer break?
So that's a great question. I do have some philosophy books that I'd like to read, like a couple about Simone de Beauvoir. But I read so much of that during the semester in my classes that I think I probably need a break from like philosophical treatises. So.
Oh, definitely. I was being a bit sarcastic when I said that. I'm gonna read nothing but fiction over the summer.
Yeah.
If I'm in your situation. Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Well, for me, I'm currently reading the third book in what's called the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer. So the first book is called Annihilation, which was a movie, I think in like 2016 with Natalie Portman. It's kind of eco-horror. It's a real interesting genre. But not like gross, like guts spilling out of you horror.
Yeah.
Just weird. But anyway, the first book was so captivating. I'm like, I got to read these other two books. Book 2, TBH, a little bit of a letdown after book 1.
Oh.
But I'm invested in the story. I think it's fascinating. So I'm on to book 3 right now. Currently reading that. The other, like from the philosophical world, the book I have to read that's kind of next on my list is called Life is Hard, How Philosophy Can Help Us Find Our Way by Kiran Setia. And I bought that. When did I buy that? I bought that in December. So it came out last year. So it's a new publication. And like you, I don't know what I'm reading after that because you walk into my office and I have this table and it's just, I mean, there's probably 20 books on it of books that I just have waiting to read. So my process is just like when I finish a book, I just kind of walk in there and whatever speaks to me, I'm like, that's the one. You're the one. Let's go. So We'll see. It's filled. It's got a few fiction in there, but it's a lot of philosophy.
Hmm.
So anyway, that's me and my summer reads. I'm going to dive deeply. That's usually what happens. I really crank out some books in June anyway.
I would like to read some C.S. Lewis of his like philosophical or like religious works because I've heard
Yeah.
good things,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know exactly where to start with that.
Oh yeah, if like the only thing you've ever read of C.S. Lewis is the Chronicles of Narnia or something like that. Oh yeah, his philosophical and academic work is really excellent. Yeah, you should check some of those out.
Yeah, I'll have to go find something. They have a lot at our one of our local bookstores in Waco.
Mm-hmm.
That's right by campus.
Yeah, cool. I've read a few of his. Let's see, Screw Tape Letters.
Mm.
I mean, outside of Narnia, Screw Tape Letters, Mere Christianity.
Mm.
I think that's all I've read though. Well, all right. Well, that's it, folks. Go out there and grab you a book. Okay, everyone. We're really excited to do this episode. When Taylor and I were talking a couple weeks ago about it, we're like, what on earth should we do? Andrew is not with us. You know, do we, I mean, we can't begin a series because Andrew's not with
Yeah.
us. So, you know, what do we do? And Taylor brought up the idea of hope. So this is a really cool thing to talk about from a philosophical perspective. And I have to say, I don't know that I ever have before.
Mm-hmm.
Taken a critical look at what hope is and what can it mean for us in our lives. I've just always been like, oh, it's just a thing, you know, that we have. So Taylor, why hope? Like, why did this pop into your head?
I think, especially after having like a whole class on existentialism, that I think a lot of people see it as this pessimistic philosophy or get it confused with nihilism. That I started to notice how hope is just kind of woven through everything. Or a lot of philosophies of life have an element of hope, that you have something to look forward to and there's some sort of deeper meaning to life and there's more beauty in living fully than there is in just existing throughout life. And so I started to notice that, and I thought it'd be cool to talk about on the podcast. And we couldn't do love because Andrew's not here.
That's
Of
right. Love is
course.
coming. But we need
Yeah.
Andrew for that one. He's our lover boy. Yeah, I think we've mentioned it. Andrew's having a paper published on love,
Yeah.
so we're going to save that for a little later in the summer. Yeah, no, hope's great. I did a lot of research for this on like different schools of philosophy and stuff, and not a lot of them directly address hope.
Yeah.
But by reading what's involved in their philosophy, you obviously pick up a sense that there's this thing called, or baked within it is hope. It just doesn't directly address it. So we'll get into a bit of that. Before we get going, it seems like when we talk about hope or use hope in our languaging, it's usually because something is not great.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, I suppose you can hope for good things just on the regular, but, you know, we usually don't pull that word out until there's a challenging situation going on. And I think of that, of course, on a societal level over the years, over the centuries, really. But what are some current issues that you can think of where you're like, okay, well, we'll just have to hope for the best?
I think one that's more like not super pressing or like more personal is that with exams and stuff, like you can study and prepare, but you kind of just have to hope for the best at the end of the day and like know that you're prepared. But then in things that are like international problems that we don't have any control over, like the human rights situation in China or the war in Ukraine, that like we just kind of have to hope for the best and that our leaders can do what they need to do to bring some sort of peace to that.
Yeah, it seems like we bring up hope when situations are honestly out of our control. That might be one of the conditions for hope that we'll talk maybe a bit about later. Yeah, that's right. These large-scale societal types of things that we can't do anything about on an individual level, or we feel like we can't anyway. Yeah, that's when we're like, yeah, we just got to hope that the universe is heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
You know, for me, just current issues that requires me to find hope. It seems like in our country right now, we can't get through a week with having a mass shooting.
Yeah.
And I hope that people in our government can make some decisions to try to address that rather than just going, "Oh, geez," every time it happens.
Yeah.
I think about women and other minority rights in our country.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of an erosion of that. There seems to be lately, a little bit, going back and forth on that.
Mm-hmm.
And another one, obviously for me, another one, like public education in the last couple of years has really come under fire. Like just disparaging and this sort of lack of trust in public education from obviously certain groups of people. That's not universal, but teachers all across the United States are just, I don't know how to really put it, just under the microscope on things that are, quite frankly, ridiculous.
Yeah.
For people to disparage the American public education system is just so misguided, because even though there's problems with the education system and those problems are constantly being worked on, there's been no greater force for social equality in the United States in the last 100 years in the public education system. And for people to attempt to dismantle it, I think it's just so horribly misguided.
Yeah.
So there's my soapbox moment. And the other things, I also had things down there like, the war in Ukraine and things like that. So, we think those are out of our control. So we have to hope, right? We have to hope. How about this one, too, before we get going and really diving into like what the nature of hope is? Can you think of any ways that hope is kind of used in popular culture?
That's a good question. I don't know if that's something that I've noticed. I guess like in terms of social issues here, we have a lot of like just send thoughts and prayers, just hope for the best.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of rhetoric around hope. I don't know. I know in like more religious movies. What is that movie where the girl has like the stomach problem and then she falls down the tree and hits her head?
Oh, I don't know.
And she's fine.
I don't know.
I can't think of it. It's like, it's not Heaven is for Real, but it's one of those types of movies that are really hopeful. But I don't know how much I see like explicitly portrayed hope outside of sort of Christian movies.
Yeah. I don't have many either. The couple things I did think about is episode 4 of Star Wars is called A New Hope.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there's a movie, I don't believe I've ever seen it, but there's a movie called Hope Floats or something like that.
I don't know.
And the other day I was driving down the billboard, we're here in Houston, and Joel Osteen has this mega church, and, there's this billboard of him and his wife, and the billboard said, "Come home to hope." And I'm like, what does that mean? So you,
who knows?
But you're right, and that's another example of religion peripherally, as Joel Osteen is to religion. I have my opinions about Joel Osteen. But anyway, you're right. Like a lot of these philosophical traditions or religious traditions involve hope. Although, interestingly, the Western traditions incorporate hope, I think on the whole, more than Eastern traditions.
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism doesn't necessarily address hope, like directly. Whereas the Gospels of Jesus, he talks about hope all the time. Or Taoism, there's no mention of hope. In Confucianism, there's hope that the system, like say of Confucianism, brings about social harmony, but it's not used directly as hope. At least it's not spoken about as directly. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if that's a difference between more of like monotheistic or like deistic religions and not like polytheistic or more naturalist philosophies that focus more on nature and not on a being.
Yeah.
But then Buddhism has deities and Hinduism has deities, but not in the same way that Western religions do.
Yeah, certain branches of Buddhism have deities. And you're right, it's very different than, say, the Hinduistic conception, their conception of deities. But yeah, that's really interesting. I do wonder now that we're talking about it, I have no idea how much hope is incorporated in the Old Testament. And, Jesus was really like, I'm bringing hope to you people. And I don't know how much it is incorporated in the Old Testament. That'd be interesting to think. And really, frankly, the Judaic religion, I don't know how much hope is incorporated in all that.
I would
directly.
think a fair amount in the Old Testament.
Oh, probably. I'm just saying I haven't looked into it.
Yeah. A quick Google search says that hope is found 14 times in the book of Job alone.
Oh, well, Job definitely needed some hope.
Yeah.
That
But
dude
that's
was
like his
going through
whole thing. His hope in God.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, when you lose it all, what do you have left? Hope.
Hope.
Actually, this is so corny. Okay, I'm not a big fan of the new Star Wars trilogy, although I'm so happy it happened. And I think J.J. Abrams did a great job. But, like, the end of the second movie of that episode, there's literally, like, 5 of them or something, and they're all on this spaceship together, and they're like, well, we're the rebellion. I'm like, there's 5 of you. They're like, we can do it. I'm like, boy, that's some serious hope there. Oh, my golly, this little kernel of hope. Anyway. Yeah, I guess when you have nothing left, what do you got? Well, maybe you got hope. Hope. Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into the nature of hope then.
Yeah.
This is kind of a weird question, I guess. I don't know if it's weird. What is it? What is hope?
I feel like that's like asking what is philosophy.
Oh, it's up there, yeah.
I don't know. I'm bad at definitions, I think. I just can't conceptualize things like into a succinct definition because hope is just such a big thing. But I'd say like a fundamental belief that things have a purpose and that there good things come out of everything.
Yeah, from a definitional standpoint, clearly it's not an object. We can't point towards it, we can't measure it, we can't weigh it. So then it falls in that category of abstract ideas that we have as human beings. And so then, the question becomes like, well, where does it come from? What are its qualities and its traits? And, is it, and we'll get into this, but, is it an emotion? Is it something that's rational? Is it just a means to express a different type of idea? Is it like a metaphor in a way? Yeah, all those types of things. Yeah, I don't know what hope is either. It's this thing.
Yeah.
that we've kind of talked about in a way of like, okay, well, there are certain conditions, right? That typically we use hope, and that's when things are out of our control or when things are not great. And so, are those necessary conditions for hope? Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. All right, well, let's hop over to existentialism. I mean, you brought it up earlier. Is hope a condition of existence, right? Like, is this a universal fundamental human trait? Is a condition of existence in the same way that, say, Camus believed absurdity is a condition of existence, or how Kierkegaard believed that despair, that episode we did a couple episodes ago, is despair a condition of existence? So in that way, is hope a condition of existence?
I would say yes. I don't think that you can separate humanity from hope because I think that we want to find meaning in things and we want to believe that there are going to be good things out of any sort of negative situation. And that's why we have so many philosophies of life that point towards a direction of hope or try to organize things in a way that doesn't amount to meaninglessness. Like, we want to find meaning in things. So I think that's evidence that we are hopeful. And if you're going to say that despair is an inherent condition of existence, there has to be another side to that. So if there's despair, there has to be hope, because like I don't think you can have one without the other.
Oh, that's interesting. So it makes me think of the Taoist conception of the unity of opposites, right? So if we go with the Kierkegaardian idea that despair is a condition, that means it must have an opposite. And that those two opposites together create some unity. So the opposite of despair, possibly hope.
Yeah, I think that's what he says, that there is hope, but to him it must be found in religion. That's the only way out of despair.
Well, and that's another idea, right? When we talk about is hope a universal human trait? So clearly Kierkegaard is talking about hope in a Christian context. No one was more Christian than Kierkegaard. So if we want to say like hope is a universal human trait, then we also have to take that same idea and apply it to some Polynesian islanders. and what is hope in their particular tradition, if it's a universal trait. And I'm going to just say, before like globalization, it probably didn't stem from a Christian belief. So if it's a universal human trait, like we say, anger is a universal human emotion. All cultures, all humans have or feel anger as an emotion. If hope is a universal human trait, where does it arise from? In some of these other cultures around the world. And I don't know, you have an answer to that? Just come up with that real quick. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just off the top of my head.
Off the cuff, yes. Access all your knowledge about cultures globally over the last 5,000 years.
Yeah, of course.
This is what we need ChatGPT for.
I mean, or world cultures.
or take a world cultures course. Come on, people. Learning's important.
I mean, thinking about it, like all of the religious foundations, if you think of indigenous America or even like the Greeks and Romans, the way that their religious systems were constructed was in a way pointed towards hope. Like they had faith that if they performed their religious duties, that good things would come to them out of that. And that like in faith, there would be good things. But I guess that's still hope in religion. I don't know that we found any sorts of hope that originates outside of religion.
Yeah, now I'm thinking of nihilism in response to your idea. Every culture, no matter what their background is, you have one of two choices. You can either believe that everything is meaningless, which is nihilism, or you can believe something opposite of that. And I guess what we're calling that opposite thing right now is hope. Everyone hopes in some way, in something. Ooh, this is a good one. It's popped in my head. Is hope equivalent with faith?
I don't think they're equivalent, but I think they go together very closely.
Yeah.
That faith leads to hope. I don't think you can have faith without also developing some sort of hope in the goodness of the future.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you have faith in your hope. You have faith in your hope that things will get better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Continue with the nature of hope. The whole feeling or emotion versus rational. And we'll get more into this, I think, when we get down into like in what ways can we hope or what are the uses of hope. But is it just some feeling that we have? Is it emotion? Are emotions and feelings different? Or is it like, is there some rationality to hope? Can you justify hoping in something in a quantifiable way? Like, is there data that you pull in to establish justification in hoping in something?
I think to me, part of hope is that it is kind of irrational. That if everything is going wrong for you, but you still have hope, like there's no rational basis for that. If just one bad thing after another happens, but you still believe, okay, something good is going to come of that. Either it's from a god or it's from you're going to turn the situation around. I think that having hope in a bad moment could be seen as irrational. Like if all the evidence points to things are just going to keep getting worse, but you still believe that they're going to get better and there's not a rational basis for that, I'd say it's not rational, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Just because something's irrational isn't equivalent to like wrong.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
what do you think?
Well, I'm thinking of Viktor Frankl, the philosopher and psychologist who survived like 5 Nazi death camps. And if we're going to take this to like the furthest degree, talk about a place of hopelessness, right? You're in that particular situation. Where do you even find hope? It seems like you said, one bad thing after another. Oh, in a Nazi death camp, it's nothing but one bad thing after another.
Yeah.
Like on purpose. And, Viktor Frankl found this something inside of himself to try to care for others in that situation. And I don't know if that's hope. Viktor, I can't remember if he mentions it in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is about his time in the concentration camps, but also establishes his psychology, which is quasi-existentialist in a way. I don't know if he directly addresses hope, but I would say the things that he did for others is an indication that he had hope. I do think, for myself, even though I may not think it through, if I have hope in something getting better, it's probably based on some data buried deep within myself of experience or having read things where times were bad and things just get better. You can think of the Great Depression. If we ever have another terrible recession or something like that, I could hope for it to get better because there's evidence that this happened once before, and I can be hopeful that it can correct itself again. Or you can go back to COVID. Lots of people made comparisons to the Spanish flu in, what was that, 19 something?
18?
Spanish flu. I mean, killed millions, far more than COVID did, if I'm right. Yeah, so we've gotten through pandemics before. We can get through this pandemic as well. So in that way, I think it's quantifiably justifiable. But is it a feeling? How about that? Like an emotion is happiness. Like you might say, I'm feeling happy today. Is it an emotion?
I don't think it's an emotion like happiness or anger or fear, but maybe in the way that joy is a feeling or like a characteristic, because I think joy is vastly different from happiness. The happiness is kind of in the moment, and joy is like something deeper or more profound than being happy in a moment. And I think hope is deeper and more profound in that way. So kind of an emotion or like some sort of feeling within the human soul, but something that's deeper or less superficial than like regular feelings.
Yeah, I agree. When I think of emotions, I think emotions are so incredibly transitory. They're here and they're gone. A feeling might stick around with you, like you're angry about something, and then 2 or 3 hours later, you're still kind of in a funk or something, but the anger has passed. And same with happiness, a surprise birthday party for you. You're very happy about that.
Yeah.
Hours later, you're probably not feeling the same level of happiness. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of the same way that sadness is different than despair. That you can be happy if you're despairing in the Kierkegaardian sense. But you can be happy or sad in despair, but it's different than those emotions that people feel.
Yeah. That's a great comparison. One of my favorite, I guess I'll call him a thinker. It's the author and content creator, John Green. And he wrote this wonderful book recently called The Anthropocene Reviewed. I recommend everyone read it. It's very hopeful. And
it is very hopeful.
Yeah, it is. Kind of a hopeful in despite of it all, And he said in that book, one of the quotes is, "For me, finding hope is not some philosophical exercise or sentimental notion." So we think about emotions. It is a prerequisite for my survival. Like, I have to have hope. And it made me think of that from sort of a biological perspective. Like, is hope something biologically a part of who we are to help? And I don't think John Green was meaning, survival of the fittest and all that sort of stuff. But it does make me think, I was listening to a podcast a couple of weeks ago about love, and they're like, love is like a survival technique for us and helps promote our species, or for our species to continue on. Do we need hope in order for our species to continue on?
I think in a way we do. I mean, I guess thinking back to all of the earlier peoples that weren't as technologically developed, they had some sort of hope. So hope isn't a new age thing, and it had to come from somewhere in some way. So it would have to serve a biological purpose, I would think, to have originated from something. I don't know if that makes sense. But like most things that survive this long have some sort of evolution. Yeah, I'd never really thought about that before. But
I haven't either. In fact, when I brought it up a minute ago, it was literally off the cuff. I saw that word survival in this quote, and it made me think of that. I mean, my gosh, if we don't have hope, you think of all the terrible things that happen in the world at the hands of other humans, but even also nature, terrible disasters, things like that, natural disasters. If we don't have hope, geez, I mean, why are we digging through the rubble to find one person? In hopes that there's one person that survived. What would happen to our species if we did not have hope?
Yeah. And people have been in conflict for like all of history too. So
Right.
to find some sort of meaning in that, people had to have some hope
Yeah.
that there was a purpose or things would get better in some way, that a conflict would end and there would be something good after it.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of merged into like what are some of the uses of hope? Like practically speaking, what are some of the uses of hope? I think we've already addressed that a bit. But bouncing back to what we were talking about a minute ago, there are lots of terrible things that happen in the world. Should we be hopeful that everything is heading in the right direction?
I think that we can be hopeful that things will turn out well, but that doesn't mean that we can let our hope lead to blind idealism and just think, oh, everything will work itself out. We don't need to do anything, because I think it's kind of an easy path to make between being hopeful and then letting it blind you into being overly idealistic. It makes me think of actually my international politics class, where we categorized fundamental worldviews, and like the most idealistic is one of the representations of that is Woodrow Wilson. And he was just very gung-ho after World War One, like, we're going to spread democracy and everybody's going to be happy and idealistic and like everything's just going to be great.
Yeah,
And
League of Nations.
yeah,
as a
everything
tool
was not great. Yeah, because people didn't back up their hope. The world leaders didn't back up the hope that they had things would get better with any sort of action. So I think that we can be hopeful as long as we're still making progress and actually taking steps and doing things to make the world better.
Yeah. Yeah, on this particular topic, I think of anytime there's something that's going on in our society where there's been kind of a backtracking of, say, rights, maybe voters' rights is what we could talk about, or all the issues that we have in our country when the disproportionate amount of Black Americans who are killed versus other races by police officers and stuff like that. And when that comes up, people protest and people are angry and feel like this is all going the wrong direction. And the civil rights movement of the 60s, this is just trampling all over that and all that sort of stuff. And when those types of things come up, I often hear this quote by Martin Luther King: "The arc of the universe bends towards justice." And that's such a hopeful sentiment. There's no specificity in it. And what does it mean by the universe bends towards justice? But it's the idea that this thing right here, right now, is crappy. But if you look at the long-term trajectory of rights in the United States, it bends towards justice. And so I hear that those types of sentiments in times where it seems like things are just very bad and going in the wrong directions. Well, you mentioned wishful thinking in a way. So hope can be detrimental, do you think, in some cases? Like, should a person, moderate hope, or can it be something that is detrimental in a way? Like, can we hope too much? Or is there a wrong type of hoping, I guess?
I think if you think of hope as something similar in concept to love, that loving in a wrong way can be detrimental. If you're giving up too much of yourself to another person in love, that if you do the same thing and like lose too much of yourself in hope, that it can be detrimental. But I don't know if that would mean it's something other than hope. Like if wishful thinking and being overly idealistic is a completely separate thing than hope, or like where on the spectrum you get to the point where you would be at a detriment by hoping. I think that you can, though, that hope can be detrimental. If you lose sight of what reality is, then you're going to be in a bad place. Like if you can't see what things are for what they are and still be hopeful in that, then you've kind of lost sight of the purpose of hope.
Yeah, so maybe something we might call realistic hope.
Yeah.
Or something like that. You have to take a hard account of what the situation is and then measure out exactly how much hope you should have. I mean, you don't measure hope, but yeah, we can get to a point where we're completely unrealistic with our expectations of what's possible.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And in that way, it's kind of counterproductive. Can hope make us lazy? It's kind of the same thing. Like we just hope all the time. Unrealistic hope. We're just like, we don't need to work on things at all. I mean, it's all going to work out.
Yeah. I would say it would make us complacent if all
we're
being as hopeful or like sending thoughts and prayers and we're just hoping things are going to get better and thinking they will and then not doing anything. And we're just like complacent in that. I don't know if that's different from laziness.
Yeah.
Or where the line would be between those two things. But I think if hope is all you have and you don't do anything to move towards your hope, then it is counterproductive.
Yeah. It makes me think of this quote by Greta Thunberg when she was speaking to the United Nations, members of the United Nations about climate change. She said, I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. Mm-hmm. Because wishful thinking, I'm sure that's what she meant by hope. I'm guessing that type of hope. Oh yeah, we can all just sit around here in the UN in our air-conditioned building in our suits and dresses and be like, oh yeah, like the environment, like we're gonna get better at this. Like no, like the time is to work and the time is now.
Especially in the UN, it's easy for member states like France and Canada and the US and Great Britain to sit around and be like, we're good. We're meeting our goals well enough.
Sure.
When there's other countries like Yemen and Somalia that attention isn't going to the right states. I think that's really poignant in the UN.
Yeah. That's good. That book that I said I was going to read this summer, and I am going to read it, the one about life is hard. I must confess, I read the last chapter because preparing for this episode, the last chapter of that book is called Hope. And so the author, I was like, can I really read this chapter without having the context of the entirety of the rest of the book? But anyway, I did it anyway. Very sorry to the author. But Kurian Setye says, for many, hope blurs into wishful thinking. And the more we hope, the more we risk despair. Why put ourselves through it? But at the same time, we cling to hope, a seeming source of light when times are dark. Yeah, but the more we hope, the more we risk despair. I think that's interesting too.
Yeah, great. The higher you set your expectations, the more room there is that they're not going to be met. And that if you think something too unrealistic that's not going to happen, then you're just going to be more disappointed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of like long-term romantic relationships. The more you fall for that person, the longer you guys are together, the more your two lives become one, the greater the risk.
Yeah, the more you risk, the more you have to gain and to lose.
Absolutely. So but then what do? We don't hope,
Yeah.
But yeah, we gotta hope. As a seeming source of light when times are dark, despite the risk. But it's interesting. The more we hope, the more we risk despair. Why would we do that to ourselves?
Yeah. Unless there's something in us that says, like, we have to hope.
Yeah, that kind of goes back to that survival deal, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That there's some reason that we hope, even though hoping too much can cause us so much pain, and it does over and over and over again, that we're still hopeful and we're still optimistic for the most part as the human race, I would say, is still hopeful.
Yeah, is it programmed into us? Like we have to hope. Can't avoid it. Yeah. Well, okay. The last couple of episodes we've been focusing on not only philosophy, but like how to practice that philosophy. And we especially did that on the previous episode on transcendentalism. What are some practices that we can do to be more transcendental or whatever? So I was thinking about that in relation to hope. Like, are there practices that we can do that can engender or cultivate or nurture hope? I thought that was a really interesting question. Is hope a muscle that we can grow stronger? And if so, like, how do we do that?
I would say, yeah.
Yeah?
That you can cultivate hope. The way that you can practice being courageous or, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other Aristotelian virtues of like courage or
justice,
strength, justice. You can practice all of those things in finding the mean between two excesses. That I would think that hope has to be the same. Like joy, that you can practice being joyous in your circumstances. So I think you have to be able to practice hope and be able to nurture hope when it seems that things are hopeless, and like teach yourself to find hope in bad situations, because it's easier to just be hopeless in most situations and just think, okay, everything is going wrong, it's not going my way. But you have to look for the things that are going well or are going your way, especially in those times.
Yeah, that's always the advice when things are really bad. You're like, well, just look at the things that are good in your life. And sometimes that helps us once we get over our emotional part of our despair. We can look at it more rationally and be like, oh, okay, well, things aren't that bad.
Yeah, not what we want to hear, but I think it definitely is what we need to hear.
Well, yeah, you brought up Aristotle. I think that's great. The comparison to, or applying hope to the golden mean. We become more courageous as we do courageous acts. We become more, as a whole, more virtuous as we do virtuous acts. And that builds. And so if you replace courage on the golden mean spectrum and put hope in there, well, hope is something that lies between two extremes, right? And so I suppose on one end you might have pessimism, and on the other end you'd have unrealistic possibility. You don't want that wishful thinking. And so hope, use Aristotle's languaging to hope at the right time for the right reasons, in the right circumstances, in the right way. That's paraphrasing, but anyway. Yeah, that's interesting to apply it to the golden mean. So speaking of, or thinking of unrealistic possibilities or wishful thinking, it's always, and we'll look at this when we look at Stoicism here in a minute, one of the bits of advice with hope is that it needs to be grounded in reality. So again, going back to John Green, this was a TikTok. Y'all ready for it? He was responding to someone who was going through a very difficult time, and he says this: hope is a funny thing because in a way it's everywhere. Like people will say, everything happens for a reason, or it will all work out in the end, which are very hopeful sentiments. It's just that they're also, bullshit. And for me anyway, they just don't hold up in the face of real suffering. But I'll tell you what does hold up for me. There's an Emily Dickinson poem that starts out, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And you'll notice that Emily Dickinson doesn't say that one never stops hearing the song of hope, only that it doesn't stop playing. And then he finishes with, I'm really sorry that you're in so much pain, and your pain is real, but the song of hope is still singing, and I know you can't hear it, but someday soon you will. And I just love that idea, that hope, the song of hope, is always playing. It's just sometimes we can't hear it.
Yeah, it's really striking to me that John Green is such a profoundly hopeful person, especially knowing all of the things that he's gone through just individually throughout his lifetime of like struggling with his mental health for so long and having, I think, OCD and like how he writes about those things and finding hope in that, but also in a way that doesn't idealize hope, that he's very realistic about it, but also firm in his assertion that there is hope and that you need to hope and it will find you again, regardless of how bad your circumstance may seem.
Yeah, he and his brother. Did you hear his brother's announcement yesterday? Yeah, Hank Green. Yeah, Hank Green yesterday and publicly announced that he has cancer. I don't even think he's 40. Anyway, both those guys are just good guys that do good things in the world. And another thing to hope against, Yeah. All right, let's take an investigative look at what different schools of philosophy has said about hope over the centuries. Obviously, this is not exhaustive, but here we go. So the first one I had was existentialism, and I have two examples for that. The first is Camus. So his book, The Plague, I read that during COVID, and I found it incredibly inspiring, even though it is darkly realistic. There's two characters in there that contrast. Dr. Roux, how do you say R-I-E-U-X? Is it Roux?
Roux, yeah.
Yeah. There's Dr. Roux and then someone else named Cottard. So Dr. Roux, well, he's a doctor, and so there's this plague in this city, and he chooses to be a healer. And then this other guy, Cottard, chooses to run away from the pain of the plague and really gets involved in nefarious activities and crime and stuff like that. So two very different responses to this stimulus, which is a plague that's killing lots of people. And Dr. Wu says, I have no idea what's awaiting for me or what will happen when all this ends. But for the moment, I know this. There are sick people and they need curing. And I don't know that he necessarily discusses hope directly, but in his actions in that book, you see that obviously he has a type of hope. And there's another character, Teru, who is his good friend, and he starts out as like not wanting to do anything about this plague situation, kind of run from it. But then throughout the book, his character arc is that he develops into like, yes, I must absolutely do something to help. And so there, Camus kind of saying hope is a choice. As the existentialists would say, everything is a choice.
Of course.
Yeah.
Nothing happens to you.
That's right. Everything's a choice. I don't know. Thoughts on that?
I like that sentiment that hope can find us, but we have to choose hope back. That like it almost seems like it's also communicating that hopelessness is also a choice in the face of hope that finds you, which I think is interesting. Of course, it's existentialist because,
Right.
you know, nothing can happen to you without your consent. You have to choose everything for yourself. But I think that's something good for us to remember, especially when things seem bad. And certainly during COVID, when everything just seemed so terrible in every situation, that we can still choose to hope and we can still choose to do positive things for other people, even if it may not change the world, it'll change somebody's life, at least in a little way, that we still have a part we can play to make things better.
Yeah, and when we start despairing about really large-scale issues, we're like, oh, we can't have any impact on it. Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it, isn't it? That we can do something. Yeah. Well, one more from the existentialist world, Jean-Paul Sartre, contemporary of Camus, says in Existentialism a Humanism, hope is a risk that must be run. So it is a risk, he acknowledges, but it says it must be run. For Sartre, obviously, hope involves risk. So like placing trust in possibilities that are not guaranteed. I think that's a really interesting way to put hope, is placing trust in possibilities that are not guaranteed. So hope embraces uncertainty, which is so existentialist. It's stepping into the unknown, acknowledging that all these outcomes that we desire, that we really want, they may not materialize, but we still got to do it. Right? We still have to run that risk.
Yeah. I like that acknowledges that in hoping for something, you do put part of yourself at risk. There's something on the line to hope. That if your expectations aren't met, that you could be losing, but there is more to gain. It kind of contextualizes that choice between hoping and hopelessness.
Yeah.
But I think in both of them, there's a risk that in choosing to be hopeless or to not find hope, you're also risking something because there's something to be gained in hope, not just something to be lost.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, let's flip over to our friends, the Stoics. Now, I got to tell you, Taylor, I did some digging. I could not find any Stoics that really mention hope. Not Aurelius, not Epictetus. They sort of...
That's so interesting. Kind of go around it.
They do. They kind of go around it. Stoicism's all about that the ultimate good rests within ourselves of living a virtuous life. And that's really the thing you got to focus on is your own self. Now, they talk about how we are part of the cosmopolitan, of the cosmos. And that everyone is our brother and sister and that we are all one. And, what we do affects others. But that's why we have to cultivate our virtue, because what we do does impact others. But they never talk about hope. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. Yeah, so that, rather than placing hope in external circumstances, they encourage other Stoics or Stoic students or whoever's reading them to focus just focus on developing their character and acting virtuously. And I think, although they never say it, that by extension might result in good. And good is, I suppose, ultimately hopeful. But yeah, they don't ever... Yeah, Marcus Aurelius, I'm like, guys, let's have hope and that everything will get better. He's like, yeah, this is the way it is. And so we must develop our virtue in response to it.
Virtue, I guess in the Stoic sense, is almost a replacement for hope. Same with Aristotle, that it does the work that hope may do in other philosophies of life. That hope may serve a purpose of, like, if you believe these things and you're hopeful in this, then there are going to be good things. Whereas Stoicism and, like, Aristotelian virtue says that if you do these things and you cultivate yourself in this manner, then you'll receive good things, which may be the same goods that you would get in another philosophy of life by being hopeful.
Yeah.
But it's almost like interchangeable.
Well, too, remember with Stoicism, they have this emphasis on indifference, right? And whatever happens to you, whether it's poverty, whether it's health, whether it's good things like wealth, or you've inherited lots of money, or, whatever, all those things are indifference. And we should not look at those as good or bad. It's just what is. Mm-hmm. And so I guess in that way, what's the point of hoping? Because everything other than the cultivation of your soul isn't indifferent. Now, there are preferred indifference and dispreferred indifference. And that's some technicality with Epictetus, but none of that really is necessarily hope.
Yeah. Huh. That's so interesting.
So I guess maybe you can be like, through a Stoic lens, well, you can hope that you'll live the most virtuous life you can. But there's no point in hoping in things that are external.
That's so interesting, because reading Meditations, Aurelius seems like a very hopeful person.
Yeah.
Or at least optimistic about the way that things are. Huh.
Yeah, like take, for example, the famous opening to the second book. Today you are going to meet really terrible people. And he gives a whole list of what types of terrible traits there are. But then he says, but I must work with them because they are basically cut from the same cloth as I am. And the hand cannot do anything, unless the foot is helping out. Like, we all got to work together.
Yeah.
Whether that person is nice to me or not. It kind of sounds hopeful. Like, I can do this. I can treat people justly, even if they are crappy to me.
Yeah.
Well, hey, let's hop over to Christianity. So Christian hope. There's a lot of talk about it, especially in the New Testament. Paul gushes about it.
Yeah.
Jesus gushes about it. So basically, Christian hope is, hey guys, this life sucks. But just wait for what's coming next. Oh, yeah. Gonna be good times. So the only quote I pulled on that, although if you just do like a Google search or whatever of hope in the Bible, you'll have a bazillion results. But this one's from Matthew chapter 11. He says, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. It's just like, yeah, life stinks, guys. But hey, you meek people, you go inherit the earth.
Yeah.
And so the hope in Christianity, it strictly is like hope in something beyond this world.
Yeah. The Bible's all about hope, kind of the whole story of the coming of Jesus and the resurrection and the crucifixion and everything.
Right.
That because of that, we can have hope.
Right. So say you're not a Christian, or you're not necessarily religious. Is there anything to gain from learning about Christianity? If you don't believe in an afterlife, or if you do believe in an afterlife, it's not probably maybe the conception that Christians might have of this thing called heaven. Is there still some utility in learning about Christianity as a philosophy?
I think there is. And I think there's utility in learning about any philosophy. But I think looking at the Bible, and especially in the Old Testament, when they didn't have Jesus to look at, they had a prophecy that there would be a Messiah at some point. But you still see the nation of Israel hoping in their enslavement. And when they're in the desert for 40 years following Moses and all of these things that just keep going wrong for them, and they still hope profoundly that their God will deliver them into a better situation in every single instance that they encounter of these just terrible persecutions, but they're still a hopeful people. And like the stories, the parables in the Bible of people being hopeful and being good and getting good things, that everyone, regardless of if you believe in Christianity or not, that you can gain something from seeing how hopeful people are in the worst of circumstances.
Like maybe gain some inspiration or something. Yeah.
I think so.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes me think of our last episode on transcendentalism. I think I said something to the effect of, you don't have to buy it, you don't have to believe in it, but one thing you might get out of it is by reading Ralph Waldo Emerson. His writing is so inspirational that it might inspire you to have a different outlook on things. Whether that outlook aligns with transcendentalism, might not be that important, but the inspiration that can come from reading Ralph Waldo Emerson can be good. Hey, what a segue. So another school that I wanted to bring up was transcendentalism, actually. So Emerson and Thoreau really talked about hope quite a lot. Especially Emerson, for him, hope was a type of transcendent force. It's something that connects individuals to this higher reality. And you believe that when you align hope with your true nature and purpose, it can lead you to a sense of unity with the divine or the universal spirit, which, I mean, everyone go back and listen to the previous episode. We talk all about that. But yeah, the Transcendentalists were quite hopeful. And in fact, if you look at some of the projects that the Transcendentalists involved themselves with outside of philosophy, Margaret Fuller was probably one of America's first women's rights leaders. And Transcendentalism had a big emphasis on public education. And so they were like trying to restructure schools and stuff like that in hope that we can build a better, brighter future. So anyway, interesting there on the Transcendentalists. And then our last one, we have, to keep in the American vein of philosophy, we have the pragmatists. And so the earliest pragmatists were like William James and C.S. Peirce. But so William James, and we talked about him kind of some previous episodes as well, his idea of the will to believe. So the will to believe is that you take, essentially, you believe that things will get better, and your belief will help create that fact. So the significance of belief for pragmatists is that it shapes our experience of the world. The world becomes different than it would be otherwise when we believe. And so if we believe in hope, that shapes our experience in the world. So his quote from his lecture called Is Life Worth Living, and I accidentally paraphrased it earlier, but he says, believe that life is worth living, and your belief will help create that fact. William James struggled tremendously with mental health, and he wanted to answer that question, is life worth living? And that's one of the more famous quotes from the end, that belief and hope has the power to influence our attitudes and our actions.
I think that's really powerful, that a lot of people could use today, that similar with existentialism, that hope is a choice, and that believing in hope changes how our reality is, because how you see the world in a lot of ways is your reality. We can't escape our perspective. So if we change our perspective, then we have a little bit of control over how our reality looks or feels to us. And I think that sort of agency would be really helpful to a lot of people to remember that maybe they can't change their circumstances, but they can change how they look at the world in a way that they still have power over their reality when they feel like they don't.
Yeah, to be like kind of really simple about it, maybe you can think of people, or our listeners can think of people in their lives that are just really negative. And it seems like bad things always happen to them. And they're just totally pessimistic all the time and always complaining. And there's this idea that if you just kind of have a positive outlook on life, then your life will be better. Now the the objectivist or materialist or whatever in the crowd, this will drive them nuts. But yeah, it's kind of woo-woo. But William James, who was also a psychologist, he's considered the father of American psychology. This idea that your belief and hope will help create that fact. Yeah. Well, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. we gotta wind this thing up or out.
We actually got through everything.
We did get through everything. That's pretty impressive for us.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, hey, congratulations to ourselves.
Yeah. Round of applause.
Round of applause for us, yes. Very good. Well, hey, everyone. We thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you will subscribe to our content wherever you find it. We're kind of all over the place. But please pass this on. We hope that you will pass this on to your friends who might need to find some hope in things. This will be a great episode for them to listen to. But anyway, thank you for listening, everyone.
Yeah, and let us know your thoughts about our episode or anything that you would like to contact us about on all of our socials, on Instagram or Twitter, or at our email at contact@opendoorphilosophy.com.
Yeah, and Andrew is really intent on growing this YouTube presence.
YouTube!
Yeah, so he is hopeful that will continue to grow. So
yeah,
and it's just terrible. Okay. Well, okay, guys, that's it for this week. We had a great time. Hope you did too.
We have to thank Kevin MacLeod.
Oh my gosh, thank you to Kevin MacLeod for the use of his free music. We hope he's doing well. And remember, when your life is in need of some philosophy, the door is always open. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.